So in this video, we're going to look at functions, just a quick revision on functions. Then we see how best we can go about these. All right. So I don't think it will be necessary for me to define what a function is because we've never seen a question for defining a function, but it is important for you to know what we are dealing with. So basically a function is a special type of relation that gives a unique output for each input. So it's more like a machine that gives an output when you input something. So that is a function. Now, basically, what we're going to do, my concentration for this particular video is the type of questions that come on functions for mathematics grade 12. Right, follow me. So now, the first thing we're going to look at when we are looking at this topic, function, is notation. So it's very important for you to know the notation that they use whenever they're asking questions on functions. So the first thing we're going to start with is, so if you have something like this, so you tell that this is a function. So that's the first notation. Then we have another notation that would be used. So basically these are the two notations that they would use for functions. So we can either say f of x is equal to something, or we can have with this other notation which we can now we cannot necessarily have f here. Sometimes we can have h. It's not supposed to be f always. We can even have h. We can even say h of x is equal to 2x plus 1. We can even say g of x is equal to, even it can even be 3x plus 1, whatever they give you. So basically that is what it is. But we're going to look at the first set of examples that we're going to see that they are likely to ask us on functions. So let's look at a question. If we say given a function, so I'm going to start with a function that is called f of x. Given a function f of x, the same one that we have, which is 2x plus 1, then they ask you to find the first part. They ask you to find f of 2. Then the second part, which is b, they ask you to find f of 0, like that. How can you find that? So basically you get your function, which is f of x is equal to 2x plus 1. Then if you are finding f of 2, it simply means where there is x, we are removing it and we are putting a 2. So we put a 2 wherever there is x. Then we say 2 times 2, we get 4. 4 plus 1, we get 5. So that is the answer for the first one. Now in the second one, we maintain the same equation, which is equal to 2x plus 1. Then now if we are to find f of 0, it means where there is x, we put 0. Then that becomes 2 times 0 is 0 plus 1, and 0 plus 1 is 1. So that is basically how we can go about such questions. They are very easy and they are very straightforward. The other part that I would want you to be familiar with on functions is the part that we use to find what we call the inverse of a function. So now on the inverse part, it's very important for you to know again the notation that I'm going to show you on how we can find the inverse of a function. Now suppose we have a function. So let's look at a question first. Given a function. Now this time around, we're going to have a function that we're going to call g of x is equal to 5x minus 1. So we have this function, then we have been told to find that. So this is the notation that we use to find the inverse of a function. They are not going to tell you, sometimes they might, but it's rare that they will tell you in words to say find the inverse of this function. They'll just use a notation. So this is a notation that we use to find the inverse of a function. So what are the steps for finding the inverse of a function? The first step is that you let g of x be equal to y. That's the first step. So now our function is g of x is equal to 5x minus 1. Where there is g of x, we put y. This should be equal to 5x minus 1. Second step, we swap, or you can interchange, swap y with x. So meaning where there is y, you put x. Then this was 5x, it becomes 5y. Then the third and final step, or just say the third step, is you make y the subject. So you make y subject. Now I can write that one as 5y minus 1 is equal to x. Then the negative 1 can cross that side. Then I can finish it up from there so that it becomes 5y is equal to x plus 1. Then I'll say divide by 5, divide by 5, that goes, then y is equal to x plus 1, everything over 5. Then from there, what am I going to do? So I'm going to say, therefore, the inverse of g of x is equal to x plus 1 over 5. So that is our inverse that we have just found. So we leave it there. That is how you can find the inverse of a function. It's very clear and straightforward. So that is how the inverse of a function can be found. Then from there, the other important thing that you should also know about functions is what we call composite functions, or we can call them functions of functions. So composite functions. So how do we go about composite functions? They are very straightforward. I'll give you an example on composite functions. Right, we're going to look at a question that is going to help us to understand on composite functions. All right, so that was on inverse. We now look at composite functions. They are also called functions of functions. So it's a situation where you have two functions. So now suppose, now let's look at some functions. So let's say given you have two functions, which is firstly h of x. We have for f of x to be 2x plus 1 and g of x to be 5x minus 1. So suppose you have these type of functions, then you are asked to find that. So this is how you find composite functions. So they would ask you to do this. So you can either find f or g. So this is the first. Then the second one is going to be g or f. I also want you to know that this notation, the fog and the golf, the fog can also be written as fgx, and this one, the golf, can also be written as gfx, one and the same. These are just notations. So in short, once you see two functions have been joined together, we are looking at composite functions. So what are we going to do? In the first one, we know that f of x is equal to 2x plus 1. Then when we say fog, we are simply saying where there is x, we leave a space, we are coming to replace it with the value of g. So this becomes, so what is the value of g here? So we check the value of g is this one here, 5x minus 1. So we put 5x minus 1 in here. Then we say 2 times 5x, that one becomes 10x. 2 times negative 1, that is negative 2 plus 1. Then that becomes 10x. Negative 2 plus 1, we get negative 1. So the final answer for fog is 10x then minus 1. So that is what we have found for the value of f of g, like that. Then in order for us to find g of f, we first write the first function that comes as g of x to be 5x minus 1. Then if we are to replace now where there is x, so I'm going to leave a space where there is x. Then I'm replacing with f, where I know that my f is 2x plus 1. This is going to be 5 times 2x, that is 10x, plus 5 times 1, that is 5, minus 1. Then like terms together, 10x will maintain, 5 minus 1, we get 4. So these are not like terms, so we leave them like that. So that is basically how you can go about that. So on functions, you just have to know how you can basically find the inverse of a function and composite functions. Those are very important. But we are also going to look at another question. Suppose from what we have found, suppose if we are to give part C, if they were to ask you to find f g negative 3. So if they ask you to find this, they are simply saying you get your fgx, which we had here, which is the fog. So for this one, the fgx, we had found 10x minus 1. Then if we are to find fg negative 3, we just replace where there is x, we put negative 3 minus 1. Then 10 minus 3, 10 multiplied by negative 3, we have negative 30. Then if we say negative 30 minus 1, we get negative 31. So f of g of 3 is negative 31. So that is basically how you can go about such a question. It's very important. Right, now I'm going to give another question that we can also look at. That is going to help us on functions. So now let's look at another question. Now in this question that we're going to look at, now suppose we have two functions again. The functions, now I'm going to use a different notation. So let me use a different notation so that you are familiar with both notations. Suppose we have two functions. The first function is this function, the g of x, which is x minus 1 over 2. Then we have another function, which is 3x minus 5. Then you've been asked now to find, let's do this. You've been asked to find the x that if the function of f is equal to the function of g of x. So we've been given that condition and we've been asked to find the value of x based on that condition. How do you find the value of x? how can you find the value of x there? So basically, what you do is that you get f of x. F of x is what? F of x is 3x minus 5. We are saying this should be equal to g of x, which is x minus 1 over 2. We can say over 1 and cross multiply. Then the 2 will multiply 3x minus 5. There we remain with x minus 1. 2 times 3x, that is 6x. 2 times negative 5, that is negative 10, is equal to x minus 1. Then 6x, x will cross the equal sign, and 10 will cross the equal sign, it becomes positive. So this will go there, 6x minus x, that will be 5x, then 10 minus 1, we get 9. Then from there, what are we going to do? So basically from there we're going to divide by 5. Even this side we divide by 5, so that 5 goes, 5 goes, then x will be equal to 9 over 5. So 9 over 5 is the value of x. So basically whatever remains here to do with functions is we are just looking at knowledge of these things. We're just looking at these things. They are very straightforward. They are very straightforward. All right. Now, without wasting much of time, I want to give a question that you can try out. I think basically those are the type of questions that you are going to find. Now, let me try to put a task here. Let me try to put a task here so that you can try to solve. So this task will go like that. So the task is that given that the function f of x is equal to 8x, and we have another function g of x is equal to 3x minus 2 everything over 4. Then we've been told to find, okay, so the first thing that you should find, you should try to find the inverse of x. The second thing that should be found is an expression, so f g x. Then the other thing that should be found is find the value of x if f g x is equal to 20. Yes, so that one should be dealt with. Then finally, if you can also find this, that. Right, so these are the questions that you should try out. So if you'll be able to answer those questions, then you won't be having a lot of challenges on this topic. So answer these questions, then you can send the answers to this line so that I can check them out. So send your answers to this line on WhatsApp, just capture them and send so that I can actually check them out and mark. So try out these questions, then you send the answers to this line 0973 415775.